Is this because I didn't let you check my voice before that we got the echoey thing?
Yes, exactly what it is. Every writer knows that the best conversations about writing don't happen in classrooms or symposia or any other fancy artisanal setting. They happen at the bar, usually after deadline. That's the vibe we're going for here. This is The Other 51, a podcast about writing. I'm Dr. Brian Moritz. Hey everyone. This week, we're doing something a little bit different with the podcast. Over the past couple of months, I've been collecting bits and pieces of interviews that, for whatever reason, didn't make it into the full episodes. So you can consider this kind of a deleted scenes director's cut episode of The Other 51. We'll be hearing an extended cut from my interview with Doug Schneider from last week, and we'll be debuting a new feature called The Secret Life of Words, which I'm really stoked about. But first off, you know how on every episode I ask my guests what the best thing they've read lately is? Well, for a couple of recent guests, I asked them what their best piece of writing advice they ever had was, or the best piece of writing advice that they ever give is. And I'm going to share a couple of them with you. And first off is Tanya Marsh, a law professor and author at Wake Forest University.
So I think a lot of it comes down to people's personal styles. And so you have to find a style that works for you. But the best piece of advice that I ever got that I found works for me really well is don't be petrified by the empty page. And, once you've got an outline and you have some sort of sense of where you're going, just start writing. And don't go back and edit the last sentence you just wrote because you used the same word twice, in a couple of sentences or something. Just get it out on paper and keep pushing. And then after you've done that for sort of, 45 minutes or an hour, whatever your kind of preset period of time is, then you can go back maybe the next day and edit it. And then edit it again, but at least you've kind of got the thoughts out on paper because we tend to get all kind of stopped up, but, by trying to get each sentence exactly right. And we just need to push on. So
was that something that you had to learn, or is that a natural thing for you? That fear of the blank page, is that something you had to overcome, or is that kind of that writing style you described, has that kind of been more natural for you?
No, that writing style is completely unnatural to me. So When somebody told me just to do it and then I tried it, it is still unnatural to me. I have notebooks and I have files on my computer. I have all kinds of like bits and pieces that I write down when I'm doing research or just I'm sitting there thinking about it. And it's important to get all that stuff out, but it's totally disorganized, and, but like you were saying about the stories that once you've heard it enough, you can get comfortable and start writing without notes. It's writing without notes, right? That I think is what allows you to kind of push through and think about things. At least that's worked for me, but that's the hard thing. I think writing is such an individual process. People have to figure out what works for them.
Tanya Marsh from Wake Forest University. Okay, next up is Jeff Pearlman. Jeff's the author of a number of best-selling books, most recently Football for a Buck, the story of the USFL. And I'm about halfway through it, and guys, it's so good. It is really a fantastic piece of reporting and writing. So I highly recommend the book. Anyway, Jeff is famous on sports media Twitter for taking questions about writing and journalism and giving advice to pretty much anyone who asks for it. And during our conversation earlier this year, which, by the way, is still one of my favorite all-time episodes of The Other 51, I asked him for his single best piece of advice.
I would say, not just, people always say, like, read good writing. They always say, read good writing and you'll become a better writer. To me, it's not just about reading good writing. It's about studying it and paying hyper close attention to it. So, just as an example, when I was coming up at the University of Delaware, a guy who was a few years ahead of me was Mike Freeman, who now covers the NFL for Bleacher Report. And Mike was covering the New York Giants at the time for the New York Times. I would pore over his stories. I would read every word choice, every transition, the way he introduced people, the way he phrased things. I just was addicted to studying writers who I really admired. And I think it's great to read good stuff, but it's not enough. You have to actually study it and absorb it and sort of pick up the nuances and what they're doing. And it's okay to copy. I mean, imitation is the greatest form of flattery. So it is okay to sort of take techniques and take devices and make them your own. That is totally okay. And I just think that's a really good way of learning to improve your own work.
I remember having my when I first started reading Charlie Pierce, and I became the world's worst Charlie Pierce copycat because I started trying to write like him. So I guess kind of piggybacking off of that really quick, but how do you make the leap for somebody like one of my students who might be listening to this, or your students that you talk to? What's the difference between reading and studying? Like, how do you take a piece of writing that you are reading that you like, and like how do you then turn that into studying it and kind of looking at it analytically?
Well, I think a big part of it, and this is going to sound preposterously simplistic, is reading it out loud.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
I think there's something really to be said for hearing the words and hearing them out loud. Everything I write, I read out loud. And so it's one thing to read. You're sitting in bed, you're reading, maybe the TV's on in the background, or you're having music. It's another thing to sit there, read the article out loud, hear how the words piece together, hear how they sort of flow. You say you were a Charlie Pierce mimic. I was a Gary Smith mimic.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And I would read Gary Smith stories out loud. I think everyone was a Gary Smith mimic if they came up in the 90s and wanted to write for SI. You'd read the stuff out loud, and you'd start piecing, and you found yourself trying to write like him, which was embarrassing because no one could touch him. But it's all part of the process, and just studying reading out loud, paying uber close attention to the words and the transitions. It's a huge part of the process of it all.
Best-selling author Jeff Pearlman. Next up on this special Odds and Ends episode of The Other 51 is Doug Schneider from USA Today Network, Wisconsin. I worked with Doug for a lot of years in Binghamton, and on our episode last week, we talked a lot about his work covering The Making a Murderer, the Netflix documentary, and the whole phenomenon behind it. But we also talked a lot about his other work, stuff that doesn't involve Stephen Avery and the film and the phenomenon and all that stuff. That ended up getting trimmed for time. So here's that portion of my interview with Doug where we talked about all the other stuff he does.
Right now, I'm in the middle of a big project related to Me Too cases in government that involved hundreds of open records requests and some legal fights. So there's some periodic dropping of what you're doing and writing statements for the attorney, things like that. We've teamed up with our projects team to tackle some not particularly sexy but important government issues. I could go into the dark stores issue, but people would all turn me off. We jump on big things when something happens, significant, the prom shooting in central Wisconsin. We kind of activate as a network, and everybody plays a role. I do the data dive, and somebody else is the reporter on the street, and somebody else is talking to kids. And, we tend to approach big stories now more as a team than, hey, let's do the best we can do as one site. And that's kind of cool. I obviously have that scanner thing that I do during Packers home games. I did a little bit of a passion project that let me, combine my love of sports and my fantasy nerdishness to an online tool where we let our Packers fans audience, because they just can't get enough Packers content, actually basically pick the team with actual salary numbers at the beginning of the season and make things work and make some of the tough roster decisions that the team's coaches and GMs have to make. And, that was fun for me because I get to exercise the other side of my brain and do a little sports nerd stuff. And so it's not just writing stories all the time. The great thing about the business now, at least with the people I work for, is, you go to them with a good idea, and they don't say, write some memos and convene some committees and schedule some focus groups. They say, put a prototype together and let's see what it'll do. And that's really great. And I think one of the ways that the business is probably changed in a way is that the cat has decided I'm a target of opportunity now because I'm on the phone. Apologies for any noises you may hear. Is that there's not that, you've got to go through layers of editors and, one person along the way can torpedo something because they don't understand it or they don't like you or something. You can do something, you put it out there, and if it works, you say fail fast, but if it works, hey, let's go. And a couple years ago, I did this roster thing, and before we knew it, our web developer was having to build one for our paper in Nashville, and another paper was interested in it. And is it something that we want to give to USA Today? That's kind of exciting. At times it can seem overwhelming because everybody wants it right away. And USA Today is working on a project that's right now that I can't go into a lot of detail on, but it's kind of a follow-up to the stuff that happened with the assistant coach at Ohio State and some criminal issues. And they basically came to those of us who, do projects and watchdog work in NFL markets and said, hey, if you want to help us out, we'd love to have you. We need to go through hundreds of records in a short period of time, and hey, if you'd like to be part of it, let's hear it. So you do some grinding, but then your stuff can get seen on a much bigger stage, and that's kind of cool.
So how did you learn the skills that you need to do to throw something together that's not a traditional news story? That's maybe like that Packers thing, which sounds kind of like an interactive web design thing. How do you piece together enough kind of technical know-how or whatever you need to be able to put that together and make that?
Well, I can't claim I did all the technical magic. We have a wonderful web developer for our group who did the nuts and bolts on that. It's kind of depended over the years. I mean, there were things, learning how to deal with a spreadsheet and manipulate the numbers and analyze data through that. I'd gotten our employers in Binghamton to send me to a course while I was the night reporter. So, sometimes there I'm learning, and sometimes I'm running out the door to cover a fire. And finally I just said, all right, I'm going to learn this. So I'm going to grab a data set, something I know and understand, so that when I screw up the formulas, it'll be readily evident. So I'm a big baseball nerd, so I download, the American League batting statistics and start performing calculations on them. Nobody's going to want to hang out with me after this conversation, but that sort of trial and error teaches you the skills so that when I don't know if you were still in Binghamton when this happened or not, but Johnson City, a village, is having a big battle about whether it should keep its own fire department or merge with Binghamton's, and their people are screaming at each other in board meetings, but it's all emotion driven. I could take the data set from the state comptroller's office of 700 municipalities and figure out a way to bring in population figures and say, all right, Johnson City, there are 700 municipalities in the state, and per capita, only 2 of them pay more for fire protection than you do, and they're both places that are like right out of the Great Gatsby. I mean, we're talking North Shore of Long Island communities, and the readers and the voters can see that and say, oh, Houston, we have a problem. The guys who are telling me that this is no big deal are not telling the truth. And breakthroughs like that are really rewarding. The company's been good about, you get good software that let you do some things. I'm, by no means am I a computer programmer, but I can build a database that you can search up to 4 ways and put it online, and I don't need a lot of technical help for that. So, I think part of it, you've got to be willing to put in the work. You've got to be interested in it. You've also got to be willing to say, hey, I need help when you need help. And chances are there's somebody in your newsroom or somebody in your group who's been there, done that, can help you out. And it's not for everybody. Some people find it deadly dull, and other people just never get it. I mean, we had one guy who, would get a spreadsheet and blow it up before he asked anybody for help. And he'd be like, okay, can't save you. But it's, you've got to be interested. You've got to be curious. You've got to be willing to learn. It helps to have an employer who'll give you time to do that. And, you find something that makes it interesting and you pull it off that way.
Doug Schneider from USA Today Network, Wisconsin. Segment this week, we're doing something new and a little bit different. We have senior editor from Dixon Schwabel Advertising in Rochester, Jen Moritz, also known as my wife. Hey, buddy.
Hi.
And we're debuting a new segment this week called The Secret Life of Words, which is probably the name of at least 3 other podcasts, but...
I really couldn't find any references when I came up with it, so...
Hey, score! Excellent. So, what we're going to do from time to time is my wife is going to join us and talk about words, because words are awesome, and
it's my favorite thing to do.
And it's a favorite thing to do, and you do this at work. I know. You can kind of set up why you do this a little bit as part of your job.
Yeah, I do. I talk about words a lot. That is my job, but also I spend all day correcting people and telling them why they're wrong, and hopefully not making them feel bad about what they've written. But it's just sort of inherent in the job that I accidentally do. So about a year or 2 ago, I started writing these seasonal word tips email to our whole agency, and just kind of giving people reminders and updating them on things so I don't have to basically scold them in person. I can sort of scold them as a group and not call anybody out. So anyway, I'm sending out one this week, and some of it felt really timely for this, so we thought this was a good place to start. It's full of Halloween-related words.
So the secret life of some of your favorite Halloween words.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so what do you got for us?
I have 3 short little ones, and then I have one monster one that took up most of my week.
Let's do it.
So the first short one is ghost. Everybody knows what that means, and it's a word that is actually thousands of years old, but way back in the beginning it meant vital spark, or actually the seat of life or intelligence, which is really interesting if you think about that like a spirit, when you think of your spirit as sort of your vital spark. So how did we get from that to spooky apparition? Well, an older spelling of ghost is ghast, G-A-S-T, and that is the root word for aghast and ghastly, which means struck with terror, shocked, and frightening.
That's cool.
We'll put all of that together, right? And you get a vital spark or a spirit that strikes you with terror. A ghost. The next one is vampire. This one is my favorite, and it's super creepy. Usually when something is invented, a word is invented at roughly the same time. So somebody put 2 pieces of bread with some meat on them and called it a sandwich. And I think most people at least vaguely know the story of the sandwich, so that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But the word vampire is actually super interesting because the legend of vampires was born in ancient Greece. But the actual word is so much newer. It actually didn't show up until about the 1700s. So that means for about 1,200 years, stories existed and continued to be told over and over again about a thing that existed but had no name.
Wow.
So maybe vampires are real.
Maybe.
And the last short one is specter, which has pretty much always meant ghost, but its original meaning was a distant relative of the word spy. So that is how you get the James Bond movie, Spectre.
And the James Bond evil organization by the same name.
Oh, there you go. See, I didn't know that.
Excellent.
But if you work with me and you get the email, you get a nice big picture of James Bond right there. And it's Daniel Craig, so it's the pretty James Bond.
As opposed to all those ugly James Bonds.
You got to do things to get people to read the emails.
Right. All right, so the last one is Halloween.
Yeah.
And I know this one. Halloween comes from All Hallows Eve. Done.
It does. You're totally right.
Except.
You're totally wrong.
Awesome.
No, it does. It does mean All Hallows Eve. But how did we get to All Hallows Eve? So I thought the answer was going to be really simple. And it turns out there's a giant rabbit hole about the word Halloween. And I went as far down it as I could, all the way back to 2500 BC. I didn't even know we could tell you what people were saying in 2500 BC, but we can. And I didn't actually bother writing down those words because they don't really relate to the words that we're looking for now. So I broke that up into 3 words: All, Hallows, and Eve. The word all, and I know you find this super interesting, it has pretty much always been the word all. Back in ancient Greece, it was another word with an extra letter. I don't remember what it was. And then right after that, it became all, and it just stayed there. So you get the word all from basically the word all. The word hallow. So that actually started, that's the one that started back in 2500 BC. But I started tracking it around 500 BC from the word helgo or hales, and I know I'm saying those wrong, but that meant healthy and whole. Then that evolved into the word helga in Old English. That meant holy one, which actually, I guess, if you think of it that way, whole became holy one. That evolved into hallway, which is Middle English for saint. And then around the 1600s through today, we get the word hallow, which means holy or saint-like. The "een" part of Halloween actually comes from the Old English word efnung. And if you kind of play with that word a little bit, you get evening. And if you see that written down, it's EFNUNG. If you write that down next to the word evening, they look actually very
really
similar.
Yeah.
So that in Middle English became actually the word evening. Except back then, they didn't shorten it to Eve, they shortened it to even. And then in the 1500s, the Scottish picked it up and they dropped that V. So much like how we turn it is into its with an apostrophe, they changed EVEN into E''EN to mean evening or even. And then eventually they just dropped that apostrophe, which we also do with kind of hyphens in our language, and they made it just EEN. So from that, you get all, hallow, een. Drop the all, and you've got Halloween. So I thought I had solved it there, and it turns out the joke was on me, because in 835, somebody mashed together that word all with a version of the word hallow and a word for mass, and they spit out the word Allhallowmas. I even looked up how to say that. It's ALHALWEMESSE. And that eventually evolved to include a hyphen, and then that was dropped and it became 3 words, All Hallows Mass, which is celebrated on All Hallows Day, and the night before that is All Hallows Eve. So, if you're still with me, all of that smushed together gives you All Hallows Een. Drop the all, drop the S, and you get Halloween.
And now we know the secret life of Halloween.
Probably.
So, thank you. That was awesome.
That was fun.
Yeah, if you have any words or anything you'd like to know the secret life of, let us know. You can drop me a line on Twitter at @BPMoritz, and we'll include it in a future episode. Jen, thanks for joining me.
For sure. And
we're gonna since it is Halloween week, we're gonna play you out of here with a little creepy Halloween music, as played and written by the wonderful Andrea Peters and the incredibly talented kid of ours, Ellie Moritz.
Yay, Ellie!
Happy Halloween, guys!
Happy Halloween!
As always, thanks for listening to The Other 51. You can find show notes for this episode and all our episodes at sportsmediaguide.com on the Other 51 tab. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. I can highly recommend Overcast for this. Our theme music is by Ellie Moritz.